Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Sheep and Stitches podcast. I'm really quite excited to be having the chance to film another episode and share more about wool and knitting and kind of all that good stuff. So welcome back to anybody that has watched before, and welcome, I know there's a few more people come over to join us from Caroline's Knits, who really kindly gave me a bit of a shout out on her last podcast. Caroline is an amazing knitter, maker, also based in Scotland, and I met her last year at the Perth Festival of Yarn, and yeah, she's great. She also has a Carly cross dog. My little beau is joining us here today. It's blowing out a little bit, but I thought you might like to see him sneezing in the sunshine. Yeah, so I'm going to go straight into this episode because I've got quite a lot of things I want to share. Really exciting that more and more people are wanting to learn about British wool, use British wool, just any kind of natural fibres really. I think it's so exciting. So I'm going to kick off with what I'm wearing. So to start with my top, it's a short sleeved top called the Navelli tee by Caitlin Hunter. This is quite a modified version. The top is written to be a drop shoulder design and a really quite open neckline. You can't see it too well with my shawl I've got on, but I might take it off in a minute when I've spoken about it, because it's a little bit warm with the sun coming in the window. So yes, this is the Navelli tee by Caitlin Hunter with this beautiful colourwork. I'll come forward so you can see better. Colourwork pattern at the bottom, which I worked in. This really deep colour is my Handspun coloured Leicester Longwool, which I processed through from a fleece myself. I've talked about that fleece before. I'm probably going to be talking about it for the next 3 years because I got so much of it. And yeah, so that was a kind of sport weight I spun up from that. And then this colour in here, the lighter colour, is some leftover Wool Matters Southwest 4-ply, which is dyed naturally by the lovely Alice, whose yarn I also always talk about, and have more of her yarn to talk about as per usual this episode. It was leftover I made last year, no, maybe 2020 I think. I made a kind of little, just a little strappy top, using most of the skein I had a bit left, and then I used the very last bit of it on my Ailbíona socks, which I talked about in a previous episode, possibly episode 1 I think. Yeah, so it kind of, those 3 projects used up all of the last bits of that skein, which was beautiful. And then the main colour here is Woolyknit's British Wool Cone, held double in the colourway Harvest. So it's this really beautiful kind of gold colour, which I think actually matches my hair quite nicely. And I just did the edgings around the cuffs and around the neck, also in my Handspun, for a little bit of a contrast because I just quite liked that look. And then my shawl, I'm going to take this off because it's kind of annoying me, but this is the Tendrilly shawl by Dee O'Keefe, who she has loads and loads of really gorgeous kind of textured, cabled, lace patterned shawls, mostly kind of triangular shape I think. So this one is a mixture of lace and cables, which I don't knit cables very often, but this one I made back in 2020 and I just loved this gorgeous design. The yarn is, it's a DK weight. It is Susan Crawford's vintage Excelana DK, which I still have a few more balls of. It was a gift and I was going to make, I wasn't sure what to make with it. It's a bit lighter colour for me personally to wear as a jumper, but as a kind of quite a fancy little shawl with the most gorgeous drape. It's got really beautiful drape, and the more I wear it, the more it softens and just really drapey. So I might be tempted to use the rest of it in maybe a colourwork shawl, something like that. I know Fibre Tales has got some really gorgeous steeked triangular shawls, but yeah, that is a very old finished object. Well, I say very old, it's 2 years old, so yeah. I'll just sit that there for now. This is my piano shawl, just serving as a bit of a throw on the sofa. I talked about that in episode 1. It's really love that shawl. But so, my Navelli tee, I mentioned it was modified, and this doesn't look quite right here, but I don't think it's very noticeable when you're wearing it when it's kind of not being filmed. I hope this isn't annoying that my head's kind of getting chopped off, but we're going to roll with it. So it's worked from the bottom up. It is a paid-for pattern, so I won't explain too much, but I can tell you how I changed it in that I did a saddle shoulder instead. So I just found a free saddle shoulder pattern online and just kind of followed the construction. I had to change the numbers for the pattern I was doing, but I could just kind of bodge it to make it work, because I knew I wanted the shoulders to come in a lot more and it'd be a lot narrower neckline compared to the original Navelli tee. So with the saddle shoulder you kind of decrease for the sleeves up, and then you do really sharp decreases across the front of the shoulder so that it really sits on your shoulders, and it's really, really comfortable to wear. I had to block it quite aggressively to kind of straighten all of this out, because obviously I just kind of bodged the pattern. It wasn't perfect, but I really do love this top and I wear it quite a lot. It's really warm, especially with this extra colour work at the bottom, and holding the Woolyknit double made it quite a dense gauge, so yeah, love this top. And then as per usual, I'm wearing some hand knit socks. These are a really recent make. These are, ooh, a bit of fluff there, out my boot. These are the Towanda socks by Heather Hill. So they are knit in Northern Yarn's Coorie, which is a worsted weight yarn. It's a blend of Swartball and Dorset Horn yarn. So it's kind of this beautiful mottledy, sort of showing you my worn socks. But anyway, it's a really mottledy, beautiful grey yarn, which I really, really love. Sorry, I think there's going to be one or two cuts there, but just because of noises outside that I'll just crop out so that they're not annoying for you guys watching. So yeah, I was talking about these socks. The pattern is written for, it's a free pattern, really recommend it for a toe-up sock, for a chunkier toe-up sock. All of the patterns and anything I mention will be just written down below in the little drop-down box. The socks are on 3.5mm needles for DK weight yarn. I really like a bit denser kind of gauge. If I'm going to knit a DK weight sock, I probably want to knit maximum on a 3.25mm needle. Probably a 3mm realistically, I'm learning, is better. And so with the worsted weight instead, it just made them a little bit denser. But I still wanted to change. So on the bottom here, if you can see, I've not made these socks kind of very long ago, so they're not worn out yet, but I could see that the stitches here were kind of separating, and I wish I had made the bottom of the foot reinforced. The heel is reinforced in an eye of partridge with using a slip stitch pattern, and I wish I had done a reinforced stitch across the whole bottom of the sock, but I didn't. So I have literally just gone back in with actually some Jacob DK from West Yorkshire Spinners, and just woven in on that heel, so that before it gets worn I've reinforced it and I'm not going to have any holes in the heels of my socks, hopefully. So yeah, that's quite a long kind of introduction of all the knitted things I'm wearing today. It is sunny, but it is chilly. We're in Scotland in February, so of course it's going to be chilly. Anyway, excuse me. So on to some finished objects. I don't have very many, mostly because one of them was some snowshoe socks, which I talked about last time, that I was making for my sister. She's had a birthday, so they've been posted down to Devon for her, and she's now wearing them in her welly boots. And then this is my other finished object, which I'm really, really pleased with. I think that's coming out quite well. So you might have seen this on my Instagram. I posted about it a couple of weeks ago. I've been using it like every day to take to bed. It's my Druid's Hearth hot water bottle cover, pattern by Kat Weaver, who also has an amazing podcast. And and yeah, so this is written for DK weight yarn. I knit mine in 4-ply, John Arbon's Devonia Pollen Gold 4-ply, so I held it double and it's created this beautiful warm dense fabric, so much so that this hot water bottle is pretty much still warm in the morning when I wake up. And even now that it's gone cold, because it's proper wool, it's got warmth to it even though the water in it now is cold. So that's the amazing thing about wool. Yeah, so all British wool. I talked about the blend, and you can look up Devonia if you want to learn more about kind of, yeah, what breeds are in this hot water bottle pattern. So that's my main kind of finished object. I now have a kind of half finished object, if I can find the right bag. So I mentioned last time that I am doing my first ever test knit. It is for the lovely Meri of Meri Diddle Makes, and she is kind of playing around, I say playing, she is doing some awesome work in making colourwork socks that are colourwork on the heel, and she's got a new pair in the pipeline which are also colourwork on the toe to make them more durable, because we so often see colourwork sock patterns that the kind of the foot and the leg are colourwork, and then the heel, which needs to be more reinforced because that's where like a lot of people's socks wear up, because they certainly do for me, on the underneath of the heel. They quite often are not in a colourwork pattern. So the idea is that if you've got two strands, the colourwork, that's coming out really nicely. If you've got the two strands of yarn and a double thickness layer with the colourwork, then the sock will be a lot more durable. So long story short, I am doing a test knit for Meri of her Nestie socks, and I have finished my first sock. So this is it. I'm just going to open it up. I don't have sock blockers. I block my socks on my feet, quite frankly. But theirs is really beautiful. Oh, I'm really wanting to knit the second sock now that I'm looking at this again. And I've tried it on, and it's going to be so warm. I'm knitting the size large, which is a 68 stitch sock, I believe. And I think in reality a 64 stitch would fit me quite snugly, but I really like that these are a bit oversized. Not oversized per se, but they've got room in them. I quite like a sock that's not too tight. And the cuff, the ribbing draws in nicely, so I don't think at all that I'm going to have an issue with them falling down. I have never knit, the socks I knit with a Flegel heel, which I have never done before, and I think it looks really cool. And whilst I have whilst it's a reasonably narrow sort of heel compared to a heel flap and gusset, and I have quite wide feet, I think it's actually still going to fit really well, possibly because it's a wide sock, but it'll fit even better, but kind of a bit bigger sock for me then. Anyway, I'm really excited to have these socks, and I'm really excited for Meri to be able to resell a pattern. We have until the end of February for the test knit. Meri's just asked that we complete one sock, which I've done, and therefore I'm at a point that I can send her my feedback. I would quite like to at least make a start on the second sock before I send her my feedback, but we'll see how things go. I've got quite a busy month ahead, so we'll see where we go. But yeah, I'm going to be sending some feedback to Meri, most of which will just be, this is an amazing sock, so much fun to knit, and the colourwork pattern is just really, really beautiful, but also really easy to memorise because it just leads you on to the next row. So yeah, I'm really excited about these socks. The yarn I'm using is, so despite these not having a colourwork toe, they are a fingering weight held with a mohair. So mine is, see, this is my fingering weight, which I have been not prepared, and hopefully the label, yes, it's in here somewhere. So this is Gullrock Fibres. Oh, I've got the shakes. Being a surgeon, veterinary surgeon, I do quite a lot of surgery and enjoy it. I don't normally have shaky hands, but I'm obviously cold. So this is a Blueface Leicester Gotland 4-ply blend, all British wool, in the colour Bath Stone. And Sinead dyes all of her yarns naturally, and they're really beautiful, and I really would like to purchase some more of her yarn at some point. So that's very exciting. And then my mohair that I'm using is a kind of mystery mohair, possibly mohair lamb's wool blend from Alice of Wool Matters. It's not a base that she's got available at the moment, but this was a kind of random skein that she let me have. Alice is a lovely friend of mine, and so whenever I see her there tends to be some exchanging of yarn. Yeah, so I just thought it matched the bath stone really well, and it is a 4-ply as opposed to being a lace weight, and therefore my toes of my socks are really, really dense. I think that's part of why I've not cast the other one on yet, because it's a bit hard on my hands. But that's no reflection on Meri's pattern, because she's written it for a 4-ply with a lace weight. So that they'll still be nice and dense, and the mohair and the silk will make them durable. But because my mohair is a 4-ply, not a lace weight, I've just made life a bit harder for myself. But the gauge came out okay, so it's fine. Anyway, my main colours are both Wool Matters. Oops, attached to a needle. Are both Wool Matters yarns. So this is Alice's sock yarn in the colour Pink Dream, I think. And this is a kind of variegated one-off skein of her Southwest 4-ply again. So it's the exact same yarn as this down here, just a different kind of bundle dyed, all naturally dyed yarn, and I just really like them together. If you look closely at the colourwork, you'll see that actually the darkest colours in the lighter yarn are also in the darker yarn, if that makes any sense. So you cannot perfectly see the patterning at all points. So for example here it's blended in a bit, but I quite like that. I think it just looks a little bit more natural and authentic, and oh, this is the most beautiful pair of socks I've ever made, so need to get going with the second one. Anyway, that's my kind of half finished object, which I think leads us on to works in progress. So the main thing, oh sorry Bodog, his toes are in my yarn. The main thing I've been working on is, and I've not brought a label for this yarn, but never mind. The main thing I've been working on is a bit of an unheard of situation in my knitting life. I'm knitting a pattern again. Now, other than socks, it's extraordinarily rare that I knit a pattern twice, but I love my first one of these so much, and I literally live in it at the moment. So this is the Gan by Ailbíona McLochlainn, which is just a really simple top-down vest with a lovely shoulder construction, really enjoyable to make. And yeah, so this is blowing out massively. Oh gosh, that I think is a fairly decent representation of the colour of the yarn. This is some yarn that I got in a D-stash of Ravelry. It was, it's actually a lace weight yarn, 100% wool, and I just got basically for £8. They just had a big carrier bag of it, and I think I'm probably only going to use about half of it for this, so maybe a bit more than half. Anyway, I'm going to have loads left, so I'm considering holding it with another yarn to make a jumper or something like that. Anyway, for this it requires an Aran weight, a DK to Aran weight yarn. Just throwing my balls of yarn around. So I'm working from 4 balls of yarn at once, which are all in this just tote bag. So I'm just leaving all the balls of yarn in there and just pulling 4 strands at a time, and it's actually not been too annoying to work with 4 strands. I think because it's 100% wool, it's a little bit grippy, so it just holds together. Yeah, I don't actually have a label, but I will write down below what it is. It's a really, really old kind of, you can tell by the label, it's a vintagey yarn, so I doubt it's being made anymore. But yeah, I'll write what it is down below. So yeah, really excited for that to be finished. I've literally just, it's my little sheepies. My lovely friend Rosie gave me these. So they're just needle stoppers because I've got quite a lot of stitches on the needle. I have just started the rib at the bottom, just done 2 rows of it, so really, really nearly finished on this one. I brought my original to show you. So this is my first Gan, which I'm actually knitting a size up this time, just because this one fits beautifully, but it's quite a snug fit, and I wanted my next one to not be quite so snug. And also I'm making it a little bit longer, so it'll be maybe an extra 2 inches on the bottom of the length of this one, just because then I don't end up with a kind of gap and get chilly around the middle. So yeah, I wear this one for work all the time, really good for vet work where I need my arms out to lamb sheep or cow, whatever it ends up being, and can keep my core warm without getting many unmentionable things on the cuffs of my woolly jumpers. So yeah, this is knit in Aran weight Shetland Romney lambswool from Fernhill Fibre, and yeah, really love this. I got this yarn when I was helping out at a shearing competition there. Yeah, and basically used every single scrap of it to make this vest, which I live in. I love it so much, hence why I'm making another one. Right, I think the only other work in progress I was going to just quickly give you an update on. I've not done a huge amount to it, but I last time was talking about my Ujo sweater by Ankestrik, or it's a tunic rather than a sweater, I guess. It's a short sleeve, fairly long. I will not be distracted by the dog. It's a short sleeved, fairly long top, which last time I think I'd done the yoke and I was just wanting to block it and try it on to see if I was happy with the yoke depth, which I've done that and I am happy with it. So I think realistically I need my needle stoppers to be on here. Once I finish the gown, it's going to go back on here. Anyway, I have since knit both sleeves, which as you can see are really tiny and are in this beautiful 5x1 maybe rib pattern. I did actually extend these sleeves very slightly, just put a few rounds of stockinette before I went into the rib, so they obviously need to be blocked out. The collar is in the same kind of rib pattern and it's blocked out nicely. There's just a slight curve on the edge, which I actually quite like. Yeah, so now into the body of this. This is slightly on pause at the moment just because I want to get my GAN vest done and the test knit socks done, so I'll be back to this once I've done those. Yes, so I'll just show you the yarn very quickly. This is Lammermuir Wool's Hillsfoot blend 4-ply, which is a soft yarn made from Shetland fleece from our own flock, blended with locally sourced grey Gotland to create a soft, silky and slightly nappy yarn with great stitch definition, which I would say is exactly true of this yarn. And it's really beautiful. And I'm obsessed with grey yarn, apparently. Okay, so now I'm going to actually move on and talk about what I said I would talk about this video in my last. Sorry, I'm just shuffling things around. I have some notes down here so I don't forget what I'm saying. Yes, so I last time mentioned this great big baby, which is only set to grow even bigger. So this is, sorry dog, this is my handspun blanket. I've called it my Great British Wool or something like that blanket on Ravelry, I think. So every square is handspun by me, and every square is a different breed. So the idea with this project is that I was collecting different fleeces from different farms along the way. I worked as a sheep shearer and wool handler a lot through the summers whilst I was still at uni, so the kind of last 5 years really. I'm still going to get to do bits and bobs of that going forward hopefully, so I will continue to collect different breeds. So most of this was collected whilst working, and I've got some more different breeds yet to be spun up, which I will share another point further down the line once I've made some more progress on this. But I've got 9 squares put together, and I think that's more than enough breeds to talk about to not kind of blow everybody's brains and my own brain. So anyway, I will start with the first square I made, which is, where has it gone? Here at the top. So this is Suffolk wool. I'm going to put a picture, hopefully here, of a Suffolk sheep so you know what they look like. But they're a very common breed in the UK. They're a big chunky breed, big floopy black ears and faces and legs. As a breed, I personally don't actually massively enjoy working with them. They're beautiful to look at. They have a really nice, I say really nice, it's a downs wool breed, so it's got quite a bit of crimp, not a massively long staple, but it's quite dense and really warm. There's a big dog hair on this blanket, I apologise if you can see that. He's not meant to sit on it, but sometimes I leave it lying around and he thinks it's great to sit on. Eventually it's going to be big enough to be a bedspread for the winter, so he certainly won't be sitting on it then. Anyway, so Suffolk Sheep have a little bit of a tendency to be quite big and dopey and not the most sturdy, hardy things, and can be a little infuriating to work with sometimes because they sort of stand and stare at you as opposed to go wherever they're meant to be going. But anyway, I like their fleeces, even if they as a breed are a bit problematic. Anyway, plenty of people do like them, they're just not my cup of tea from a shepherding standpoint. So, the Suffolk breed has been around for quite a long time, but they were, I've got this written down, in the early 1800s was when they kind of were recognised as a pure breed of themselves, but originally they were bred up from the Norfolk Horn sheep, which is reasonably rare these days. I don't think I've ever actually seen one in person, and with the South Down ram, which is a small floofy kind of sheep, which I will try and put pictures of those both in as well. Yeah, so the yarn, if you've watched Caroline's Knits video where she mentioned me, which is so kind of her, really, really kind, she talked about the fleece and fibre source book, which I've got, it's sitting on the table over there. So I've got a little bit of information I pulled out from there, and also from, I'll put a link, the British Wool Marketing Board, or British Wool as they call themselves these days. They have a kind of booklet on their website which is free to download and has loads of information about the different breeds, so it's there, and from the Fleece and Fibre Source book that I've kind of got some of my statistic information from. So the Suffolk fleece is a 5 to 10 centimetre staple, 31 to 34 microns, and its category is a Downs wool, as I've said. So yeah, that's the Suffolk. And there's kind of an end, you can see what the yarn looks like. So yeah, I really, really like this wool. It would be gorgeous as a big thick jumper. So next one. This is, oh dear, this is blowing out, but that is actually quite accurate. This is some Black Welsh Mountain by Hearth. So this is the only square in the blanket that I actually used some commercially prepared fibre tops. Just because I had them. It's British wool still, from an online company called Hearth, which I used a lot when I first started spinning. I do really recommend their shop. They're just online, I think. But the Black Welsh Mountain, which I have actually shorn a few of them, not many, just a couple. They're lovely little sheep, very crazy, kind of polar opposite to the Suffolk I just talked about. I actually quite like them. They have quite a dense fleece, and when you shear it off them, it quite often comes off in kind of a rug, and you're like, this is not going to be good for spinning. But you comb it out, you card it out, whichever, probably card it realistically, and yeah, and it actually is quite soft. It's a really nice yarn. I really like this stuff. So yeah. Right. So what can I tell you about them? It is a 6 to 10 centimetre staple with a 32 to 35 micron. It is pretty much one of the darkest wools you can get naturally on sheep in the UK anyway. It's not black, it's a very, very dark brown. But yeah, it's lovely. I really like it. So yeah, that's that one. Next, I did a square of this one, which looks quite similar actually. This is a Dorset Cross sheep. I apologise for blowing out, but it's showing the square, okay, so we're going to roll with it. This is from a Dorset Cross. Now, I mentioned Dorset Horns, which is in my socks that I'm currently wearing. So the Dorset sheep, there's a couple of different ones. There's the Dorset Down, which I'll get to in a minute. There's the Pole Dorset, and there is the Dorset Horn. So the Dorset Horn and the Pole Dorset are very similar. They're a big chunky sort of sheep, very traditional breed. They do well on kind of rough, not really rough grazing, but they don't need a lot of food to keep condition on them, basically. Look at this toe. And yeah, but so Dorset sheep are white, but this is a crossbreed. I'm not sure what with, but the ewe was mostly black, with a bit of white in it, and it's a nice soft fleece. It's the Dorset that this comes from is it's also a Downs wool type. So I'm just reading the notes I've made. I'm just remembering that. So originally in the UK we had horned Dorsets, but they bred some of them polled after bringing in Australian rams, after importing Australian bloodlines back. So originally they would have been here as horned Dorset, went over to Australia, they bred them to be polled. So polled means no horns, like naturally no horns genetically. So now in the UK the polled Dorset is a lot more common than the Dorset horn. Yeah, so a lot of shearers don't enjoy shearing Dorset sheep because a lot of farmers really like them because they are, as I just said, pretty hardy sheep. Yeah, so sorry, I just stopped for a vehicle going by. They are quite hardy sheep, they do well, they produce a good lamb and a nice fleece actually, not that that's a priority these days. Anyway, Dorsets are great until you sit them on the backside to shear them and then they decide that they really would like to kick your head in. So that's fun. So they're a challenge to shear, but yes. Most sheep, I'll talk more in depth about actually shearing one day, but most sheep, so we sit them on, kind of sit them on the bum to be sheared, and you move the sheep around so that you can easily access each part of the sheep and you shear in a specific pattern which makes it the most efficient and the best for the sheep because you're kind of being quicker so they don't have to sit there for so long. And if you know how to hold the sheep properly, 9 times out of 10 the sheep will just sit there. You're moving the sheep all the time so they never sit anywhere. Once you're proficient shearer anyway, you're moving the sheep kind of all the time so they don't sit anywhere too long and get uncomfortable. Yeah, but Dorsets are renowned for being a little wrigglers, but yes. Anyway, that is the Dorset. Another thing about the Dorset sheep is that they can lamb out of season. So most sheep are what we call short, what is the terminology? Short day breeders. So they come cycling in the autumn and going into the winter, and a sheep's gestation is 5 months roughly, so they'll get in lamb in the autumn and then springtime is when we get the lambs. And so most sheep, you can kind of, there's a bit of a spread, and the kind of hill breeds that live in the colder areas and up in the high hills, they tend to be a bit later, so that when they lamb it's probably April, maybe May, and therefore even in the higher areas there's actually a bit of grass on the ground and the weather's not so harsh for the baby lambs. But Dorsets are an oddity. There's just a few other breeds, I believe the Portland and maybe something else. They will breed any time of year, so you could have lambs in September if you wanted, which is quite common, and actually is where, so I'm going to go into this now because I've gone down this road. So one of the curses of the farming industry, well, the sheep industry then, is that we call the meat from a sheep lamb, right? I have no problem if you choose not to eat meat, that's your decision. I personally believe that it's part of living sustainably is to eat meat in this country because we rear our animals in quite a natural way. Sheep especially, they spend most of their days outside eating grass and sustaining the natural environment that they live in. Anyway, so we have this thing about Easter and lamb for Easter, don't we? But actually the lamb's being born at Easter, so where does this come from? So in reality, if you're buying lamb from the supermarket at Easter, it will either likely be lambs that have been born really early in the year, so maybe January, and have grown on quickly, or it might be from something like a Dorset that's lambed maybe somewhere between September and Christmas time and grown on so the following Easter they are ready to be eaten. or it might be kind of the previous season's lambs, so some of the slower maturing breeds, or lambs that just kind of haven't been as quick growing, they'll then be about a year old at the point that you're eating them. Yeah, so that's just a thing. It's not lamb, it's not baby lamb. I can't need another word for it in my mind, because yes, obviously it's the same animal that there was that cute baby lamb, but it's not what you're eating. It's a great big lump of a thing. And yeah, as much as I still think they're great, I think, you know, we have really high welfare standards that need to be upheld, and we have vets and farmers and other professionals making sure that they are upheld. Yeah, anyway, long waffle about that. Let's move on back to wool. So my next wear is this beautiful kind of varied colour. So this is some Blueface Leicester. So Blueface Leicesters I talked a lot about in my last video. I'm not going to talk too much. They are a fairly big sheep, but with quite a fine fleece, and we use them a lot to cross with hill breeds to get a fairly kind of a good sturdy middle of the ground, good at being a mother but also quite hardy ewe that we call a mule. You have to watch my previous video. I'm not gonna talk about that for hours again. But this is from a coloured Blueface Leicester ram. Most of them are white, but some of them are coloured. Yeah, and it's really nice and soft. And some general information from my lovely book on the Blueface Leicester. So it's described as a lustrous and silky wool. It is kind of 8 to 15 centimetre staple, so it can be quite a long staple. 26-ish microns, so that's quite fine for British wool. I think a lot of the Blueface Leicesters in this country are probably a bit higher than that because we're not specifically breeding for the fleece, but can be as low as 26 microns, which is really quite fine. And it's, you've probably seen Blueface Leicester yarn if you're at all into kind of natural or British wools, because it's really quite popular as a knitting yarn. The fleece on them is maybe only 1 to 2 kilograms, which a lot of sheep that you see in the UK, their fleeces would be maybe somewhere between the 2 and 5 kilogram mark. Most of them around 3 kilograms in general. So for this fairly big sheep to only have a 1 to 2 kilo fleece kind of shows how it might be really good quality, but you don't get much of it. Yeah, so next one to move on to, this one seems to have dog hair on, annoyingly, which I'm just trying to remove. Anyway, this is the Lammermuir. So I didn't do the best job of preparing this lovely fibre. Knit up, I actually quite like the feel of it. It's quite coarse, it's quite it's a really strong fibre. I think it'd make amazing socks. I did a pretty rubbish job of preparing this fibre because it was before I got my drum carder, and it's a lamb's wool, so it's a reasonably short staple because it's a lamb's wool, and it's quite a rare breed. So I got this wool from the lovely Sarah John of Woolly Wales. I'll link her below. She does awesome things with regard to wool and is super knowledgeable. She's just finishing up a degree, I think she has just finished, a master's degree in kind of wool and sustainable textiles, and she's super knowledgeable. She's great. So this is from one of her sheep, and I personally don't think I did it justice because I wish I'd had my drum carder to be able to card this lamb's wool, and I also think it's because my spinning ability is hugely improved since I did this, but I like the finished feel of it. It's nice. Anyway, so the Lammermuir is a Welsh breed. I have never worked with them, so I don't know a massive amount about the sheep, but from what I've read, they're pretty versatile sheep to keep either in higher or lower ground, and they're just generally quite tough. The wool is described as a soft to medium, which I could definitely agree with from feeling this fleece. 6 to 10 centimetre staple, so the lamb's wool I had here would have been a little bit shorter than that, but that would be a kind of adult fleece, adult ewe or ram fleece would be that long, and 31 to 34 microns. So it is, that's, I think it is a rustic yarn. Pretty much all of these yarns I'm showing you are what we call rustic or kind of coarser yarns, but it is, the micron count isn't the be all and end all. It could be, say you had a wool that's a micron count of 30, if it's a lustrous one and silky it might feel quite soft, whereas if it's a coarser 30 micron, a kind of rougher surface to it, then you know it would feel different. Your fingers would know it's different even though the number says the same thing. Anyway, so that's the Llanwenog. And my next one is not a British breed, but it's a sheep that is the ram that this came from lives in Somerset, so it is very much a British sheep, even though it's not a British breed. So this is from the Dutch spotted sheep. So the Dutch spotted is quite similar to the Texel sheep I was talking about last time. It's a really chunky sheep, but they're finer face, finer legs, so lambing and the whole giving birth process tends to be a lot less problematic. They're just bred in a way that they can more easily give birth because their faces are finer and their legs finer. So when a baby lamb's born, they should come out like this basically, toes and a nose and out first. So if the head's too wide, that's when the ewes can struggle and need intervention sometimes, and many other reasons, but that's a kind of pretty common thing. And that's why if you know anybody that keeps sheep, they're probably a little sleep deprived around lambing time because they've been up all hours of the day working hard, making sure that the lambs are being born right and all of the other jobs. Anyway, so this breed is becoming increasingly popular in the UK. Some people are choosing them instead of the Texel because of that kind of lambing ease, but they still have a really kind of nice chunky shape to them, quite popular for showing at the agricultural shows across the country. If you're interested in seeing sheep this summer, look out for different agricultural shows in your area and go. And then you can walk around the sheep bit. You probably can speak to the breeders, will be there kind of looking after the sheep at the show, and you'll see them. I'm sure you've heard of like dog shows where you obviously like crofts and things where you compete dogs for which is the best looking, best behaved, all the rest of it. And you basically do the same thing with sheep, horses, cattle. So the sheep will get cleaned and smartened up nicely and trained to walk on a halter in the same way you train a horse to walk on a halter, really. Some of them better behave than others. This is turning into an entire like education on the entire sheep industry, but apparently people say they're here for this, so here we go. Anyway, so Dutch Spotteds, if you go to a agricultural show that includes a sheep show, you'll probably see Dutch Spotteds. Yeah. So next, big stretch. Next I've got, where's it gone? This one. Back to the Dorsets. So this is a Dorset down. So this fleece came from the shearing contractor I used to work for. It's from one of his own sheep. It was from a shearling ewe, so she was just over a year old. So that helps the fleece be nice and fine. Yeah, like for the breed, it helps be nice and fine. It's got this beautiful texture. Again, it's a down spool breed, so the Dorset down is different to the Poll Dorset. They are still a really kind of hardy sort of sheep. Not hardy as in live in the hills, but hardy as in live outside, live off grass, and not waste away to nothing if there's not too much grass about. And it is a nice, dense, fairly crimped wool again. Yeah, there's my end. Is that my end? No, that's my sewing up end. I don't have an end to show you. I've woven it in. A miracle. Anyway, yeah, so the Dorset down sheep, the Poll Dorsets have white faces and pink noses generally. And I'll stop getting distracted. Whereas the Dorset down have a kind of dark brownish coloured nose and legs. I'll put pictures in of all these breeds as we go along. But yeah, so the Dorset down breed, here's my information from that British Wool booklet, was developed in the late 1800s from Berkshire, Hampshire and Wiltshire ewes crossed with a South Down ram. I have never heard of a Berkshire sheep before. I'm presuming they don't really exist anymore, but Hampshires and Wiltshires do. So the Hampshire Down looks very similar to a Dorset Down, it's just a bit bigger. So the South Downs are quite a small sheep, so I imagine that the South Down put to the Hampshire is what kind of shrunk them a bit. But yeah, they're Downs wool breeds, so they're that nice, short, dense, springy fibre. With a 5 to 8 centimetre staple, 30 to 32 microns. The dog seems to want to leave. What a good boy he is. And yeah, so they're a really adaptable sort of breed that just, yeah, nice soft fleece. And again, this would make an amazing chunky jumper. Really, really like this wool. And it was really nice to spin actually. I have a little bit more that I dyed with red onion skins. So it's a nice kind of light green colour that I need to decide what to do with. I dyed it just as washed wool, so I haven't decided how I'm spinning it yet. But yeah. So we're getting through this. We're on to the last square that I have so far, and this is probably my favourite for many reasons. So this is Swaledale. I mentioned Swaledale sheep last time because they're one of the hill breeds that we really commonly... It's not the last one, I've missed one. I'll come back to the last one that I've missed. Anyway, the Swaledale sheep is a very hardy hill sheep from Cumbria. And they're from kind of... that's a lie. I told you Cumbria. You find them in Cumbria quite a lot, but apparently they're from kind of North Yorkshire, Westmoreland area. Anyway, they're a hill sheep. There's a lot of kind of kemp in the fleece naturally. So this fleece is from a hog, so like a year-old sheep. There's a lot of different names around the country for like year-old sheep. So I apologise if I switch between, because I'm from Devon. So back home we'd call it a hog, a year-old sheep, whereas some people would call it a shearling. Many different names. Anyway, yeah. Because this is just from a 1-year-old sheep, it's quite soft for Swaledale wool, which is normally really coarse, ropey, kempy. So kemp is, if I pull it out a bit, it's hard to pick out. So can you see the kind of really white bits? I don't think it focuses that well. There's basically, kemp is a hair type fibre rather than a wool. So it's quite brittle, it's kind of as thick as human hair. There's one bit there. No, I don't see that, are you? Anyway, it's really brittle, it's not soft, but it's part of kind of keeping the sheep warm in this really harsh environment that it lives in up in the hills. And Swaledale sheep are special to me because there's a big flock of them down in Somerset where I used to work. So I pretty much learnt to shear on Swaledale ewes. The Swaledales are quite small sheep and they don't have much wool kind of around their faces and legs. They'll lose their belly wool in the summer. Most sheep will lose their belly wool in the summer if you wait long enough. But yeah, so they were a brilliant sheep to learn to shear on for me. I'm going to insert a few pictures of me shearing with the team on the Swaledales. And yeah, I love shearing them because I'm quite little and most of the guys that I've worked with are like way bigger than me, so for them to be shearing kind of 80 kilogram Suffolk, it's kind of equivalent if I'm there shearing a 50 kilogram Swaledale. Not really, but you get the idea. Like, I'm little, so shearing little sheep suits me. They are really kind of sprightly, lively sheep, and yeah, I think they're good fun. Up here they are really not very popular because we're up in Scotland, so the Scotch blackface is kind of the equivalent up here. The Scotch blackface is a bit more shapy of a sheep, a bit more meat to them, as it were. So in reality I think the Scotch blackface in some ways is a bit better of a breed, but I like Swaledales because that's what I've spent quite a lot of time working with. So we cross them a lot with the blue-faced Leicester to create a North of England mule. So that's a really common, the speckly faced sheep that you see a lot. and the fleece is got a 10 to 20 centimetre staple, which also makes it really lovely to spin. I've got more of this, and I'm actually using the Swaledale. See if there's a bit where you can see it well. I'm using the Swaledale to stitch. I'm just doing a simple stitch, like sewn stitch, to join my squares together. I'm not going to put any edging on, I don't think. I'm quite happy with it just being kind of plain edge, straight edge for the square. There's got to stitch around all of the edges of the squares, so I'll get the end sewn in, it'll be fine. Sorry, my brain goes in a million different directions whenever I think, so if that is problematic for you, please tell me and I'll try and be a bit less random. Anyway, so the micron count on a Swaledale is 35 plus microns, so you can see why it's pretty rough. But I'm now going to go on to an even rougher fibre. So this is Herdwick. Herdwick sheep are those, you've probably seen a picture or something of Herdwick sheep, or heard them called Herdies. They are those, they're born pretty much black with like a bit of white on their faces, and as they get older their fleece turns grey and nearly white eventually by the time they turn into old ladies, and their face and legs are pretty much pure white. They're quite cute. This fleece is from a lovely lady called Kate Scott. She is called the Drover's Daughter is her kind of business name and kind of social media name. She also knits, and she weaves, and she knows a lot about herbal medicine and grassland management and all that sort of good stuff. So she very kindly gave me some of her Herdwick fleece because I told her about this project I was working on. So you could describe this as a bit of a Brillo pad. It's from one of her mature ewes. So there's a lot of kemp that I was talking about. You can see that in there, I think. The white, a lot of the kind of these bits sticking out are the kemp. But it makes it really warm, and actually with wear this is getting softer. This wear is, I've been using this kind of on my bed already even though it's not finished, and it's already softer than when I first knit it, so it really is true that wool softens with wear. This is not soft, but as a blanket, you know, unless you had it like against a bare leg or something, it's not gonna, personally I don't think it's gonna cause you a problem as a blanket. Yeah, so they also have a 10 to 20 centimetre staple and 35 plus microns. Yeah, it's a really, the colour is beautiful, I think. But yeah, so that is my great big blanket thus far. I'm knitting just a bit of a mixture of textures and patterns on the squares just to keep interest really. It's all spun to roughly chunky weight wool. It does vary a bit, not all of the squares are the same stitch count, just I cast on enough stitches to make the size match the squares basically, trying to spin it to the same sort of chunky weight wool, but it's very rustic, very just an exploration of wool really, and I'm really enjoying it. And that's an awful lot of talking, so I hope that you enjoyed that, and as you may see I'm quite prone to going off on waffles about wool and sheep and all of these things, and basically I'm just really happy that I'm able to share it. So thank you so much for watching all the way to the end if you've made it thus far, and I will look forward to sharing this video once I have edited it a little bit. Yeah, I might include a few pictures of bits and bobs I'm working on. I have done a little bit of spinning recently on the Shetland fibre from what's eventually going to be a jumper held with the mohair cone I've got. I'm working on the second skein of yarn for that. I think I'm probably going to have 4 or 5 skeins in the end, so we're making progress. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching, and I will speak to you again soon.